Welcome to another week's analysis behind the news. One of the things that we see in the news today is all the foofara over Ron Paul's candidacy for President of the United States. It seems as though the establishment Republicans are a bit disturbed. It turns out that Ron Paul is amassing far more delegates than have been reported in the newspapers, and some of these people in the top echelons of the Republican Party are not happy with this. I don't know who's going to get the nomination. According to the people who know such things, they say it's going to be Romney. However, I think they're in for a surprise as to how strong Ron Paul is going to be represented at the National Convention. The problem that we have, and has always had, but we're usually out of sight, is the corruption within the Republican Party. They do not want anyone assuming any office, local, state, or federal, who is a constitutionalist, and will go to many, many lengths to see that that never happens. It doesn't matter whether or not you have the votes. It doesn't matter whether you follow the rules. The rules will be changed and the votes will be negated if they do not want you in a state convention, a national convention, or anything else. We do know that there have already been letters sent out, particularly to a state like Nevada, warning them of Paul delegates coming to the national convention and the possibility that they may not be recognized as the delegation to the Republican convention. This is not new. Once in a while you'll find a little blip in the Republican Party where they will be constitutionalists, but that's because there's an overwhelming majority of people that desire a particular personality at that time, such as a Goldwater or that sort of thing. Since the beginning of the Republican Party, since it was founded primarily by the leaders of the Communist Commune in Ripon, Wisconsin, you can trace that progressive movement, if that's the label you want to put on it, through the history of the Republican Party. In the elections of 1912, for instance, a sizable number of Republicans broke off for the candidacy of Theodore Roosevelt and put him up as presidential candidate on the Progressive Party. Once Wilson won the election, the Republican Party came back together again, and all those progressives moved back into the Republican Party, and they've been there ever since. It's a problem in the party. They pose as neoconservatives. They pose as any sort of conservative, but they are very dangerous individuals when it comes to upholding the Constitution of the United States. We see in the paper that Canada is ready to go penniless. We know that good money drives out, bad money, drives out good. And in this case, paper is driving out the last vestige of intrinsic value in any coinage in Canada. It's only a matter of time that will happen in our monetary system as well. If we just keep issuing paper after paper after paper and gobs and gobs and gobs of it into the trillions, ultimately the value of the transaction will be less than the value of the metal in the coin itself, meaning copper in this particular case. And as a result, we will go and drive out any kind of a penny in the system. We're finding, for instance, that young people, that says that the jobless young find their voice in advocacy groups. In other words, a lot of graduates from college these days can't find jobs in their profession. They've gotten student loans, but they can't find the professional level to be able to pay those loans when they go out into the workforce. They become sort of a block, if you will, of individuals getting involved in advocacy groups for the environment, Acorn, just to try and get these student loans just completely wiped off, turn it over to the state, let the government pay for them, that sort of thing. These individuals normally go into white-collar professional jobs. Then they become what is known as the Republican vote, if you will. But not any longer. There are going to be more and more of them as Democrats, simply because they want government to solve a problem for them, and they've been taught their whole life that if there's a problem you can't solve, government will do it for you. However, within this mix, there are a lot of people who, the younger ones, are waking up and realizing that maybe government isn't the answer, and they are getting behind various candidates around the country. One interesting thing here, too, is Al-Qaeda is far from defeated. And we learn in this Wall Street Journal ad today is that Al-Qaeda has now come into Yemen, it's come into Somalia, and it's the thing is that as it says here, finally there is the fact that attacks by Al-Qaeda and its affiliates have increased over the past several years. Now this increase has come about when we supposedly have a war on terror and are taking care of Al-Qaeda. We constantly have our government officials telling us that the latest death of an Al-Qaeda leader means the death of Al-Qaeda, but we just keep having more Al-Qaeda. What a lot of Americans are not aware of is that these affiliates are growing up in other countries, like in Pakistan and Somalia, and also in Nigeria, affiliating themselves with Al-Qaeda. And all of these Al-Qaeda affiliates and groups have sworn their allegiance or loyalty to the Al-Qaeda leader al-Zawahiri. Now, as we've explained before on these broadcasts, al-Zawahiri is a Russian asset. He was trained by the KGB to be a terrorist the way he is. And he's the man who got in as the second in command under Osama bin Laden. In fact, Osama bin Laden even came out of a Marxist organization in the beginning too, the Brotherhood in Egypt. But at any rate, you know, the KGB didn't go away. When communism supposedly collapsed, the KGB changed its name to the FSB. Same organization, same officers, same structure, and put one of their own as the leader of Russia, Putin. And so people have to recognize that we cannot eliminate terrorism until we understand two things. One is that terrorism is always state-sponsored. It is not an independent organization. It is state-sponsored. The second is which state? And that state is Russia. We don't advocate going to war with Russia, but in order to fight terrorism, we have to understand who our friends and who our enemies really are. Another thing is in the Friday Wall Street Journal was the Wisconsin recall amnesia. And it's talking about the recalling of Scott Walker. There's an election up here very shortly, pretty much promoted by the unions. And the unions want this man gone. They want the Republicans out of the legislature, mainly the conservatives, because they do not want all this union power dictating as to the health care that everybody has and everything else. As a result of the things that they were able to do in Wisconsin, it has improved the economic situation straight across the board. It has saved teachers' jobs. It has actually cut back on the property taxes of the people in the state of Wisconsin. It has started to balance some of the local governments because of the ability by local governments to zig and zag when they need to formulate a budget, which they were mandated that they couldn't zig and zag before. They had to do it certain ways, and it cost more money to do it those ways. But at any rate, we'll see how it turns out here in Wisconsin, whether or not these unions gain this much power. One of the things that they do not teach in schools any longer, they still did to a degree when I was in school. I won't tell you how many years ago that was, but at any rate, something called syndicalism. In other words, coming to power through the power of the unions. If you remember correctly, Nazi stands for the National Socialist German Workers' Party. National Socialist German Workers' Party. They were organizing the unions like other socialist and communist organizations were doing, but the Nazis did a better job of it. And as a result, that was one of the things that helped bring Adolf Hitler to power in Nazi Germany, was this power of the union. Now granted, once they came into power, then the unions came under the government. And this is the thing that a lot of union people do not understand. By putting more and more power through the union leadership into the government, ultimately that will come back and destroy the unions, because once that power is accumulated in government, they're not going to tolerate you. You're just a worker. You work for the state, and that's the way they like it. And that is syndicalism, and it works irrepressibly once you start to accumulate union power. It happens every time. Until next week, we'll see you then.